Chapter 2. An Inventor and a Bulldog. The three friends began the short walk back towards their homes. They all lived close to each other, Tom and Clovis since they were babies and Eve since she moved in with her uncle 5 years ago. Tom lived with his mum and dad in a small house on the estate behind Eve and Clovis. Clovis lived with his mum and 19-year-old brother Jamil in one of the high-rise flats next to Eve's house. Eve lived with her uncle Rufus in a strange old twisted building that dated back to the 1500s. With it being so old and having such historical importance to the community, the council could not demolish it, so when they constructed more properties, they just built around the old house instead. The ancient building did look out of place, comical almost, a tall twisted black and white two-door house that over the centuries had buckled and bent. The uneven windows looked out across the street towards huge high-rise flats that had seen better days. The little historical house that once would have been surrounded by farmland was now squashed between two more ugly high-rise flats. However, the quirky little home suited its residents perfectly. Uncle Rufus was a little eccentric, a university professor by day and an inventor by night. Eve would often go to bed listening to the noises coming from his attic. Old jazz music softly filled the house, accompanied by the sounds of urgent hammering and sawing, mixed with some very loud rude words. The attic was his sanctuary, a place where he could research, invent new equipment and just be alone with his thoughts. Uncle Rufus loved the room at the top of the old house and didn't let anyone in except his British bulldog, Boris. Of course, Clovis thought Uncle Rufus was a legend and had tried in vain to get access to the famous attic many times. What was he making up there? Eve would often report back to Clovis and Tom about some of the apparatus she saw her uncle carrying up the winding staircase. One day he brought home a trombone, a space hopper and a large copper bath, and Eve and her friends all sat at the top of the stairs listening to every sound they heard and trying to guess what he was making. They never did find out. Now Eve clicked the front gate shut and walked up the stone steps. She put her key in the ancient lock and pushed open the heavy front door. As usual, Boris didn't move, but just lay there with his eyes half open, watching Eve take off her jacket. His little excuse for a tail wiggled as Eve stroked him. "How's my lovely boy, then? I missed you today." Boris acknowledged Eve by licking her face and farting. "Nice. Wow, that stinks." Eve held her nose and walked up the long hallway, past photos of her mum, dad and her Aunt Jess. Memories of happier times when they were all alive. 5 years earlier her parents and her aunt had been tragically killed in a train crash. Eve's mum and dad had died instantly, but Eve's aunt, Uncle Rufus's wife, had remained in a coma for 3 months until late one night she unexpectedly and sadly died too. Uncle Rufus had always been a happy person and had been close to his sister, Eve's mum, so after the accident it was decided that Eve should go and live with him. He'd been good to her and helped her through those first few dreadful months when the pain of losing her parents was so raw and overwhelming. However, after Aunt Jess died, Uncle Rufus seemed to change. It was as if a light had gone out inside him. Although still loving and caring towards Eve, he seemed to have shut everyone else out of his life. Only Eve and his work seemed to matter, and now he seemed to spend more and more time in his attic. Eve set about making dinner for herself and her uncle. She knew it was unlikely that he'd have eaten anything all day. He just got so involved in his work, he forgot to eat. So, she scrambled eggs and buttered toast, then served it out onto 2 plates and put one of them on a tray with a napkin, cutlery and a glass of water. She took the tray up the creaking staircase to her uncle, round and round. Boris panted behind her. The poor dog hated those stairs, but Eve also knew he would go through anything to get to his master. Once at the top, she knocked on the attic door and called softly, "Uncle, your dinner. I've brought it up for you." A clattering noise came from within the room followed by soft footsteps. Slowly the door creaked open and a pair of old-fashioned spectacles adorning a handsome, middle-aged face peered through the gap. "Oh, how lovely, Eve. I'm famished. I would join you, but it's just I'm so close to finishing a project. I don't want to lose my momentum." He put his hands out and took the tray from her. "Good day?" he asked, opening the door a little wider with his foot so as to allow Boris in. "Yep, it was okay, I suppose. Uncle, is it all right if I go out trick-or-treating with Tom and Clovis later?" Of course, but make sure you're not back too late. You know how I worry." "Thanks, UNC, I promise." Eve kissed her uncle's thin face and closed the door. He was a kind man, Eve thought, and she loved him dearly, being the only family she had left. She wouldn't do anything to upset him, and she did feel uncomfortable about lying to him, but she and her friends had been looking forward to this night for ages. Clovis had been the one to introduce them to the world of the paranormal. Even Tom hadn't realized that ghost hunting was something you could actually do. Millions of people around the world went off in search of ghosts, Clovis had told them, and these people had all sorts of special equipment to capture paranormal activity when they spent the night in some very creepy places. Even Tom had watched the programs and internet clips that Clovis had told them about. Instantly Eve had been transfixed, and along with her two friends had been fascinated by the idea of trying a ghost hunt themselves. Tonight was to be their first ghost hunt. After last night's excitement in the cemetery, she was keener than ever for their Halloween adventure to begin. Taking 2 steps at a time, Eve rushed into the kitchen, bolted her dinner down and then ran back up the stairs into her bedroom, where she began to pack her rucksack, 3 torches, a night vision camera, and a VR board. She'd bought the board on the internet, and the details and planning for tonight had mostly been her idea, even down to the spooky location. A few days ago, she had unexpectedly stumbled across a drawing of a house, a map and some notes left on the kitchen table. Normally her uncle never left his university work lying around, but on that particular morning he had left in a hurry and must have accidentally forgotten the notes. They were for some sort of social history project, Eve figured, but as her uncle was a professor of science, not history, Eve wasn't sure why he had them. Anyway, according to the unfamiliar handwriting, the house was in Epping Forest and abandoned. It looked quite spooky from the picture, and there were some footnotes about it being haunted. Eve had made a copy of the information and decided then and there that this would be the perfect location for their first ghost hunt. She hoped it would be a night to remember.